Well, good morning, everybody. It is a chilly pre-Thanksgiving Wednesday here in Oklahoma, and this is DIY Dave here today with a little bit different video. Yeah, we are going to be working on a car, but we're going to focus today on how you go about finding obscure parts for what became an obscure part repair for me on our 2008 Sienna. Now, this was not a huge broken car, can't drive it situation. This was a somewhat cosmetic repair that at least could have the potential for affecting drivability. But it was something I put off because I kept thinking, oh, I see what's broken. I could probably find that part easily and do the repair pretty readily. But when I finally took the time, sat down, looked at the part, tried to investigate where it came from, what part it was a real bear to find. And finally went through some of the Toyota forums and through the great help of a member of the Sienna chat forums online named Paul R. We actually got this part, and we're going to do the repair to make this part whole. So let's take a look first at the particular kind of repair that we're talking about. Now, some months ago, we're looking at the passenger side right of the Sienna. Some months ago, I happened to notice that this flap piece was torn, was missing. There's actually supposed to be a flap here, hangs about 4 inches down from this piece. It's held in by two bolts here and then a bolt underneath. But then I also noticed that this flap here was completely detached. You can see that little hole there. That's supposed to be where the screw that goes through this piece and secures it to the frame. Well, that bolt is still on the car. It's just that that bolt is still on the car. It's just that the flap on that inner liner has torn. So it initially seemed like I was going to have to replace this entire frame, this entire piece right here. So I took a look and tried to discover what it was called. I initially assumed it would be part of this right rear wheel well area. But try as I might, I had no luck finding anything that looked like that part. And so I went over to the other side of the car to see if there was a complementary piece, and sure enough there was. Now this is the driver's side of the same car, and there is that very piece on this side that is intact. So what occurred to me is this part right here is attached separately, and as I said, it's about a 4-inch long part. So I thought surely that might be described as maybe a mud flap or a splash shield, something as an extension to the wheel well. But no matter how hard I tried to find it, I couldn't find a thing that would describe what that part was. So that took me on a bit of a parts chase. And if you've ever tried to find an obscure part, you might be surprised how difficult it can be, even with the internet, how tough it can be to find parts that aren't obvious, like an alternator or a spark plug or a fan belt or lug nuts. That part was hard to describe. So what I'm going to go through is a little bit of a separate part of the video describing how I found that part, some steps I took to find this obscure part, and how I got the help of some folks on the Sienna chat forum to identify this part and actually have one made. And then what we're going to do is realize that in addition to this part having come loose, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to fix this flap to get it to reattach to the frame of the car, so this part doesn't come off again, because until we get this bolt put back on, we're not going to get the car repaired. So we'll take a second. So we're going to take a few minutes, show you how I found this part, the steps I went through and the difficulty I had in trying to find it, and then how a friend on the Sienna chat forum helped me find the part, and he actually sent one to me. So hope you enjoy this video, and we'll get about getting the repair taken care of. Thanks for watching, and have a great day. I first set out to find this part. I assumed it would be part of the wheel well. So I searched multiple different ways trying to find wheel well trim. I tried mud flap, dust guard, none of which worked. I ran out of ideas on how to search for it. And then what I finally decided to do is I took a picture of the part, and I went down to a Toyota dealer down the way here from our home here in town, and actually asked the Toyota parts guys if they could find it for me. Two different guys were looking through different parts picture databases until they finally came up with what they thought might be the part, but they weren't sure. And to be honest, from the drawing, it looked like the part, but you couldn't be sure. It was part of a larger assembly that goes in the wheel well that it was identified as the fuel filler neck. And that's what I'll show you on here.
Okay, when we first started looking at this part, the part that I ended up taking down to the Toyota dealer and having them look at the picture, they came up with this part right here, and this is the fuel filler neck insulator. The fuel filler neck insulator was a pretty good guess, except for one small problem, and that is the fuel filler neck on my Sienna is on the driver's side, not the passenger side. So what we basically concluded, we took a little bit of a deeper look into some of the pictures, in particular this guy right here, which I guess they don't, yeah, which they showed right here, was that they basically mirror imaged these parts, because if you look right here, on this diagram, we have the left-hand side piece and then the right-hand side piece. They basically mirror image the parts. Even though the driver's side is the one that has the filler neck, they mirror image the same part, the same molding for the right-hand side, even though there's no filler neck. At least I don't know of a Sienna model that had the fuel filler on the right-hand side. So for the sake of simplicity, they just molded the same part and mirror imaged it on the other side. But that left me with a more perplexing problem in that that even though this part looks to have been the right piece, well, the real piece that I was interested in was this flap right here that I hope the cursor is catching. So I was faced with the idea of buying the part that might have the flange that might fit on the right side of the car and putting in a $35 plus shipping investment, which probably would have run me close to $50. Well, I wasn't crazy about that idea. Yeah, it would probably fit, but I really didn't feel like taking a $50 bet that it didn't. So before I went that far, I decided to go over here to Sienna Chat, and I went to their forums and I posted a message on the forum here asking someone there if anybody had seen this part. So without going into a lot of detail, I just posted basically the same message that I am putting on here about, hey, what is this part? Have any of you guys on Sienna Chat, do y'all have this Generation 2 Sienna? Have you seen this part? Here's a picture of it. Have you seen it? Well, after a few days, I got a couple of, yeah, I haven't seen that. Don't know what that is either. I get a notice that someone had in fact posted a message. They weren't in direct response to my thread, but they had started a fresh thread and said that they went to the junkyard and found the part for me, and from an '05 LE from a local junkyard, and if I would text my mailing address to them, he would send it to me, no charge, and just ask me to do something, pay it forward, do something nice for somebody else. And he did it. Paul R. is our hero for the day. Incredibly nice of this gentleman to take the time out of his day. He went to a junkyard, he found a car, he got the part, paid for it, put it in the box, and paid to mail it to me. Golly, I mean, you just don't think there are nice people like that, but Paul R. is one of them, and I sure do appreciate it. The part came in the mail about a week ago. We've had some adverse weather, a little bit chilly. It's even chilly today, so I haven't been able to get the part put on as quickly as I would have liked. Finally had a chance to do that today, and the part arrived like I said, about a week ago. Looks like it's going to be a perfect fit, and that's what we're going to put on. So a thanks seems so inadequate for the effort that Paul R. went to. Thank you, Paul. I hope you see this video. I told you I would give you a shout out in the video when we put this together. So let's go back out to the driveway and go ahead and get this part put on. Thanks again, Paul. We sure do appreciate it.
And this, folks, is ultimately the piece that we were chasing down. And this is the piece that the username Paul R. On the Sienna Chat forums was kind enough to go to the trouble of going to a local junkyard near his home. He took the time to find a 2015 Sienna, a 2005 Sienna, found the part, took it off, and he mailed it at his own expense to me. You know what? That's just way beyond nice. I can't thank him enough for taking the time to be thoughtful enough to send this part to me. He certainly didn't have to do that. I will certainly try to return the favor to someone. The one thing he asked me is to pay it forward, and I will be happy to try to do that. But this is exactly the piece that we're going to attach to the Sienna. Okay, so now you know the process that we went through to get the part. And before we do that repair, what we've first got to do is we've got to figure out a way to get this piece to stay attached to the car. So here's what I'm going to do. I have an empty milk bottle, just a plastic milk bottle, and some JB weld here, if I can get it in frame. There's some JB weld. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a piece of paper and I'm going to trace out the shape of this part of this bracket and then cut the milk bottle to fit. And then I'm going to use some of this JB weld to sandwich that part together to give myself a secure location through which I can reattach the bolt and then reattach this flange. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to trace this part out. We just got a piece of paper and a pencil. We're going to trace that part out so I have a good template to work from. Okay, that's better. Yeah, this is much better. There, that gives us a much better template. What we'll try to do is we will cut the milk bottle piece to fit this circular template, and then we'll just kind of guesstimate the location for a hole and then glue them together with JB weld. Okay, so now we've got our template. It's not a precise template, but it should be more than good enough for our purposes. So let's go inside and cut the piece and glue it up. So here's our template. Okay, so now we've cut out a little piece, and there is our template. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the plastic piece on the template, and I'll trace our template with a magic marker, and that will give me at least a pretty good idea of the outline where the hole goes. So now we will cut along the line of our template here.
So hard to put down. Roll chicken tacos party packs. Get your first delivery free. Orders $12 or more. Only on Grubhub.
And then we will cut across here. So there, that should serve as our cutout piece to reinforce the tab. And then we will just cut out a little spot for the hole, which I believe is a 10mm bolt.
You don't know how this works, do you? First day. At GoFlex, we strive to make long-term success.
There.
Inescapable. That's why we've spent
All right. So there's our piece. Now we're going to just take our JB weld. We'll put this onto the existing piece and then go ahead and put this back on the car. So before we glue this up, we're going to take kind of a test fit and make sure that our part lines up with our template. Now I'm having to hold this with one hand, but it looks like we've got a pretty good fit with our template piece. So all we really need to do, and again the original piece right here is a little bit bent, but what we're going to do is we're going to mix up a little JB weld and we'll smear it on this guy and we will clamp them together and then let that set up. So we're going to get a couple of gloves and mix up some JB weld. Okay, we've mixed up just a small amount of JB weld, got some gloves on. We mixed that up and we put a thin layer of it on our template piece here. Mixed up the JB weld, we mixed it onto our template piece here. So now what we're going to do is simply mate that to our broken piece and try to clamp it. Now, I'm filming this by myself, so I can't promise I'm going to get the best possible angle, but we'll go ahead and do the best we can. I honestly can't tell. Okay, there's the piece. There's the piece that we're wanting to clamp on. And what I'm going to do now is put a clamp on there to hold that while the epoxy cures. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little piece of flat wood right here. So we're going to clamp this across here, because this is where we want it to bond. And we're going to just take a basic clamp here and try to get this thing to clamp up and secure. And I guess really all we can do is wait for that to bond. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes since we let this clamping setup hold. We're going to take a look to see if this is set up well enough for us to release the clamp. And unfortunately it slid a little bit. It's not quite perfect, but I think it's still going to be good enough for our purposes. Let's see if we can reach the mounting hole, and we can. That's our primary objective here. It's not a perfect repair. Sometimes a DIY repair is a little bit clunky, but if it's good enough to hold that piece in place, then that will achieve our objective. Make sure we can see that in frame. If that little flap will hold in place, then we can replace the little flange there. So we're going to get a 10mm bolt, or excuse me, a 10mm ratchet, loosen this bolt, and reattach this piece. Okay. There we go. There's the broken piece that fell off of that screw. And now we're going to put that through our makeshift repair piece, and I have to admit I'm not terribly confident that this weld, this JB weld's going to hold, but we're going to try it. We're going to give it a try. Okay, that's snug. So this piece is now in place. Now what we're going to do, now we're going to remove these three 10mm bolts to take away this old piece of damaged flange, and then we will replace it with this nice new piece of flange. Thanks again to Paul R. So let's go ahead and there's one screw. There's two screws. There's the third screw, and there is the old piece. So now there is the new piece that fits like a glove. Look at that. Like a glove, Paul R. Absolutely perfect. You can see that. The camera is not cooperating today on holding still. Try to balance this a little bit better. but the piece fits like a glove, right smack on. So we're just going to put in, we're going to get these things just started by hand. Obviously we're not too concerned about official torque specs since we could barely find the part, but we're just going to get this all buttoned back up as close to new as we can. And then lastly, get this bottom screw in here. And folks, that is our repair. It is in, and as I said, this is not perfect, and I will freely admit I'm not entirely convinced this JB Weld with my piece of plastic milk bottle patchwork repair is going to hold. We won't know. We're going to try it, and if it doesn't, then we'll fix it a different way. But this repair is done. The alternative here, as we showed in the earlier part of the video when we tried to figure out what this part is, we would have had to probably have replaced this entire piece at somewhere between $30 and $50 for the part plus shipping if you bought it OEM. The only place you're going to get it unless you go to a scrapyard, and there were no scrapyards in town, as I mentioned in the sourcing part of the video. But this part is in place. This appears to be, at least for now, a good repair. Once again, I cannot thank Paul R. enough for him taking the time and trouble out of his own day to go to a junkyard and find a matching car and a matching part and to send it to me. Goodness, there's a lot of fine folks in the world that would go to that much. There are not that many folks in the world that would go to that much trouble for a complete stranger, and I sure do appreciate it. The internet can be a good thing. You hear a lot of horror stories about it, but there's a lot of good that can come out of it too. This was not the most critical repair in the world, but I'm glad to have it done, and I am certainly thankful to have come across some folks that were willing to help, and I hope to be able to help someone else in the future. That's going to take care of it for this repair on DIYDave. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like these videos, please subscribe, hit the notification bell. We put these out whenever we get the chance, whenever we have an interesting project. This is a little unusual project. Thought it might be interesting, and I think it has been as much an adventure for finding the part as it was doing the repair itself. Have a blessed day, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye, everybody.